Well, welcome everyone. This is David Morgan of the morganreport.com. And today I have one of the stalwarts in the industry who I've known, gosh, Keith, it's probably been a couple decades or close to it. I think the first time I saw you was in Europe, and Frank Veneroso had just written his gold book. And that was kind of the scuttlebutt going on, all this leasing and all that. But I don't want to get off track. There's something that you and others did very recently, and I want to stay on topic, but it's just good to see you, and thanks for coming. But late January of this year, 2024, the CEOs of 19 companies, including First Majestic, Core Mining, Hecla Mining, and others, sent a letter to Canada's Minister of Energy and Natural Resources, Jonathan Wilkinson, to request silver be added to the Canadian Critical Minerals List. The letter states that silver is an essential component for many technological and industrial applications because it's the most reflective material, thermal conductor, and electrical conductor. The letter also states that silver is vital for the clean energy and is required for Canada's transition to a digital low carbon economy. So, for our listeners or viewers that have not seen the letter, what's the main message?
Well, first off, Dave, it's great seeing you again. It's been a while since you and I've had a chance to have an interview together. I'm super pleased that you've taken notice of this letter that we put together. And it all started really with the United States publishing their critical minerals list about 6 months ago. I guess it was June or July of last year. And it was I think it was the USGS that published the list of the top 50 metals or minerals, and silver was not on that list. And I saw this, and I go, "What the heck? Like, why would silver not be on this list?" And many of these metals I actually didn't even recognize. I've been in science, and I take pride in knowing what the periodic table is. I was quite shocked that there was a few minerals on there that I wasn't familiar with, but yet lo and behold, silver was not there. So I immediately called our director of ESG here in Vancouver, and I said to her name's Jillian, and I said to her, I said, like, what's going on? And so she phoned the Silver Institute, right? And the Silver Institute, basically said, well, we just weren't successful in our endeavors. And I said, well, gee, this is not very good. And then we got to get silver on this list. And it just so happened that Canada was going through a process as well to publish a critical minerals list. And I think it's going across all countries. Finland and France have already come out with their lists, and they did mention silver too, but they didn't call it critical, but at least silver got mentioned in their reports. And there's a variety of other countries. There's about 30 countries that are all coming out with their critical minerals list or critical metals list or critical materials, whatever. They don't have their own names, but nevertheless, all these lists are coming out. I gather it's to do with supply chain and keeping internal security or whatever their reasons they come up with it is. But we were able to get this letter, and all the silver companies. Or most of the silver companies to sign. It's great to see. And we had Hecla and Core and Mag and the list. There's a variety of companies that joined us, and we led it. First Majestic led it. Something we should be proud of doing. And we got this letter to the Canadian government, to NRCan, and apparently they're going to be publishing their list of critical minerals or critical metals in May. So we're hoping to see silver on that list, and we're going to keep hitting the United States. There's efforts underway right now. I know there's calls taking place this week with parties involved in this whole process, and we hope to be in front of the U.S. Congress with our team here in the next few months to try to get silver added to the U.S. list as well.
Very good. It's first of all, let me publicly commend you for spearheading this. It's hard enough to get 3 or 4 people in a room and get them all to agree. Yet, how do you get this group of silver executives to come together? Because if you do it, it's that maverick, that one-off, that First Majestic guy, that Keith Neumeyer. But you get 19 others and you put it together. That's power. How did you pull that out?
Well, I have to give the credit to Jillian, our director new, she's a relatively new hire, and she's just got a ton of energy. And obviously, she was taking direction from us and trying to get this accomplished. But she was just able to get everyone on side. And Phil Baker, he's the current president of the Silver Institute, and he's a supporter of this idea. We had others as well, coming to the table, and it just it worked. It's really nice to see. I was actually, when I saw all 20, I think it's 20 executives. So you said 19, but I think it's actually
around 19 and you. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there you go. So, but I was surprised because me. I've been talking silver for 20 years now, and I feel like sometimes I'm the lone wolf and out there talking about silver, and yeah, it's good to see.
Well, a letter was published during a public comment period about Canada's opening up the critical minerals list. Clearly, you made an argument for silver to be on the list. Did you have any other comments that were made to the government?
The problem we have, well, David, silver is looked at as a poor man's gold. The understanding of silver and these, metals that are on this list that you've never heard of, most people wouldn't even know what they would make up, in technologies. Yet, silver, you would think that people would know that this computer that we're talking over right now, or whatever devices that we rely on a daily basis, are made up of silver. And without silver, these components just simply would not work. But yet these politicians who are, creating policy, trying to secure our supply chains, for the industries of a variety of companies that are active in our countries, producing products. And it's in the country's best interest and the government's best interest to protect these businesses in the best way they can, have no clue, about really what silver is in these components that we're all manufacturing. Yet, this is the effort we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to, I've been spending 20 years educating investors, why I think silver is such an important metal. I came up with the term years ago, strategic metal. You've heard me say that many times. I created that phrase, I don't know how many years ago, over 10 years ago. I started calling silver a strategic metal, calling it a critical material or a critical metal. And in the eyes of politicians, I think is a very important part of this entire process, because not only could it potentially reduce financing costs, potentially expedite permitting, or even potentially have tax credits as a result of producing these important, obviously we're talking about silver, but all critical materials or metals, is really good for our economies in both the United States and Canada, because we need to produce these products, and without these metals, we're not going to be producing the products. Simple as that.
Yeah, you pretty much outlined a couple more of my questions. Let me just revivify or go over a couple things. So the benefit of being on a critical minerals list, of course, silver isn't there yet, and it should be. When it is established, then it could expedite mining, maybe fast track permitting, maybe get rid of some of the red tape that you would encounter if something that isn't on the critical minerals list. Am I correct?
That's the expectations. This is what the governments are saying. This is what they're claiming. That's why they're producing these critical minerals lists, because they're trying to get industry to produce more of these products, which is kind of unique. And of course, it's all happening in the last couple of years. I think mining has been under attack for probably the last decade at least, or maybe the last probably couple of decades. But we're now seeing, due to supply constraints that are occurring, are actually reaching up to some decision makers, some policy makers within governments are seeing that, hey, look, industry needs these products, and the mining sector just not simply producing enough of it. So there's a bit of a change occurring, and which potentially could be quite exciting. We do know, and we just saw the Silver Institute's consumption numbers come out a little while ago on 2023. It's not a final number, but they estimated 1.2 billion ounces of consumption of silver in 2023, and they actually said that the mining sector produced less in 2023 than 2022 by a marginal amount. I think it was like 820 versus 825 or something like that. So there is still a significant deficit of somewhere around 400 million ounces. Where this silver is coming from, who knows? But nevertheless, those kinds of major deficits can't just continually occur over long periods of time, and the mining sector needs to get up and make investments into the mining sector, into these silver mines, and get more silver out of the ground to supply technology and bring green energy to the planet. And it's very critical. And yet, if the miners don't have that confidence in governments that will allow us to permit assets and finance assets over a long period of time, the mining sector just simply won't make those investments. So I think silver being on this list is pretty important.
It is. Let me digress a couple places. One, as we both know, about 70% of silver is a result of base metal mining. Lead, zinc, copper, and even gold produces over 12% of the silver supply. Do you think if we get silver on the critical minerals list, that a base metal miner that has a good amount of silver as a byproduct could have leverage with the government? Going back to the previous question, in other words, I'm XYZ Mining, I'm primarily a lead zinc miner, but I got a good silver credit, and I need to fast track it because silver is becoming short supply. Do you think that would apply in this case?
Well, it's interesting you say that. I've been in the mining sector for 35 years. I started with a copper company, and so I look at copper and zinc as critical as well. So
sure,
I think they should all be put on the critical metals list.
Okay. I think we've covered pretty much the benefits of being on the critical minerals list. Do you have any further comment on that?
No, it's just we're optimistic. The good Canadian authorities aren't going to tell us today whether silver is going to be added to the list, and where there is a regular communication going on almost weekly with them. They're not telling us exactly the date they're going to be putting out the new list. We're expecting it's going to be May. We're expecting to see silver on the list. We'd be very disappointed if it wasn't on the list with all this efforts that is currently underway. Assuming it is, and we are successful and it gets on the list, I think that's going to really add to the momentum that gets the USGS and the DOE engaged and get silver on the 2025 list for the United States that is expected to be published. I think other countries around the world will then follow in suit. And maybe we'll win this battle, David. Maybe eventually, people will start believing this, what we've been saying for the last 20 years, that hey, look, silver is a unique metal. It's not just some poor man's gold. This is like a pretty critical element in all of our lives, and maybe people will wake up eventually as a result of these efforts.
Well, there's so many adjectives we can use that apply. You use strategic and others. I use essentials, one that I think the Silver Institute uses. And I want to digress and give you a quick story for our viewers, because it points out on this side of the border let's say, how not in touch with reality some of the political class are. So when the Silver Liberty program started, known better as the Silver Eagle program, and the Mint started taking that stockpile of silver that they didn't know what to do with and started minting out eagles, the mandate was it had to be silver produced within the confines of the United States. And I met with one of the critters that came from one of the houses of Congress. I won't say it was Congress or the Senate, but one of those mucky mucks in Idaho at a restaurant, one-on-one, and explained there wasn't enough mining in the United States of America to even cover the requirement for the Silver Liberty program in a few years. And even though I made that statement, which sounded just couldn't even grasp it, basically. I mean, I don't want to make it too big a deal, but he just basically shined me on and was like, well, just in time inventory. I mean, I just call up my logistics guy on the phone and order silver. What are you talking about, right? Well, I was correct. And of course, the law was changed that the United States can import silver from wherever it is in order to meet the mandate for the amount of silver required for the Silver Eagle program. Of course, that has not been accomplished in a few years, as you well know. There's been much more demand sometimes in some years than that the mint actually produced. So I digressed, but I just wanted to point out that this ability of the political class to really be, let's say, on the ground, so to speak, they're not. They're in their ivory towers and they think everything happens by phone calls and pushing paper around or writing something down and making a mandate or a law. And that's not how the real world works at all. You and I ought to know as well as anybody walking the ground on these mining camps. So back to you. If you want to comment on that, you may. It irks me every time I think about that because he wasn't arrogant. He truly believed that I was wrong, that, he had political power and I didn't, and they need more silver. They just did it.
Yeah, no, I didn't know I didn't know we were going to go down this path, David, in this call, but I did make some notes. As a result of your comments, let me just add a little bit to that, some color to that. So, as I said earlier, the mining sector globally produced 825 million ounces of silver. Is the latest estimate from the Silver Institute for 2023. Canada produced 10 million ounces of silver in that period of time. The United States produced 32 million ounces of silver in that period of time. The United States consumed 150 million ounces of silver in 2023. So they imported, 120, 118 million ounces of silver in 2023 from somewhere. I don't know where they're getting it from, but probably Mexico, I would assume. But they're importing a ton of silver. And it's a very interesting market. I just think that it's very misunderstood market, and we're doing our best to educate governments right now, and hopefully it works out as successful. Before we end, we should talk about our mint as well.
Sure. Well, let's go on. I got a couple more before I forget, and then we'll come to the mint. Okay. Is Canada the only target to get silver on a country's critical minerals list?
No, absolutely not. And that's my point earlier. So we have a list of about, and I don't have it in front of me, but it's about 30 countries that are all actively engaged in producing critical minerals lists. And as I said earlier, Finland and France has produced. They're the only two that have actually mentioned silver so far. We're hoping that's going to change with Canada coming online this year. With Canada coming online, we're hoping that a variety of these other countries will be revising their list, because some of them haven't published since 2020, 2021. So some of these countries are fairly far behind. Some of them have just produced their list last year, like the United States produced their list in the summer of 2023, which I mentioned, which started this whole process, and they're not going to republish their list until 2025. So it seems to be every kind of 2 to 3 years that each of these countries publishes a list, and we're going to be extremely active. We're going to do our best to make sure that silver is on every one of these countries' lists.
What would you suggest our viewers do to enhance this cause, to take the letter and maybe distribute it on their social media? I mean, is there anything that the average silver buff can do?
Yeah, I'll ask Jillian that question. There is a video on YouTube where the Congress, as a result of this critical minerals list that the United States published last year, there was a variety of letters that were sent to different congressmen, and there was a meeting that was held and was YouTubed. I saw it myself, and one of the congressmen mentioned that they should be considering silver on the next list. So I'm not sure who's on this committee. I'd have to talk to Jillian and the group here. I have to get some details on that, but you know, let me circle back, and I'll see what I can do on that.
Okay, great.
It could be quite helpful. We can you know, get more than just 20 mining executives. Maybe we can get 20,000 shareholders as well, focusing on the same task at hand, right?
Especially if we can get Elon to retweet it.
Yeah.
So let's come back to your mint. You wanted to talk about the Canadian mint.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I don't have contacts with Elon Musk, but it's not that I haven't tried. I've tried tweeting him a few times, but he's a very stubborn guy. He never replies to me. But anyways, so the mint, yeah, no, it's we actually today we made our first melted our first bar today. So we're going to be hopefully this afternoon I'll be getting a report from the mint that they've now created our first kilo bar. So we'll see, but we're getting close. Within the next couple of weeks, we expect to be fully operational with our e-commerce website up and running, and yeah, it's going to be exciting because I think David, that there's the supply constraints in the market because the mints just simply can't produce the product to meet the demand, and the challenge that the mints have because silver is so volatile. And this is why we've seen mints go bankrupt over the last couple of years, is because they have to go and buy the metal, right? So whatever number that is, call it 100,000 ounces of silver, they go buy for $25 an ounce, and then it takes them 3 months to melt it down and produce a retail product. And next thing you know, the silver price is 22, and they try to go sell it, and they can't sell it for they want to sell it at 27 or 28, just to make a profit, because their cost is 25, against cost 22, and they end up losing money on the trade. And this has happened time and time and time again, and it's been a huge hindrance in the minting industry for them to grow their businesses, because they don't have the balance sheets behind them to really kind of finance that trade. And so for us, we don't have that issue, because we produce the metal, right? So we don't have to go buy it. The metal comes from our mines, and we just, we can hold it back. We can sell it if we wish. We can, do whatever we want. Our costs are our costs, and our costs are obviously, substantially below spot. So we have a lot of flexibility.
So explain a little bit more on this new bar. Is this the Royal Mint producing a bar with First Majestic's mintage on it? Is that what you're doing?
The name of the company is First Mint LLC. So I was actually surprised. I was actually surprised we could actually get the name, but we did. So it's a 100% fully owned subsidiary of First Majestic Silver Corp, called First Mint, based out of Nevada. And there's a small staff there. We've been equipping it for the last 6 or 8 months. It's been under construction. We've got all the latest high-tech machinery there. We've got some great management that's running it. I was very pleased to be able to get the team that we were able to put together to run this operation. It is separate from First Majestic. But does report to Vancouver. So of course we've got all the oversight and everything else. But those ounces come right from Mexico, right into the mint, get melted down as retail products. Will be the first products are 5 ounce, 10 ounce, 1 kilo bars. So just the 3 products for starters, and we're going to get really good at that. We're going to perfect those 3 products over the next 3 to 6 months, and then we're going to start adding other products as well. And ultimately, the goal is to get all of our production, through this mint. Now, whether we can accomplish that, time will tell. It's a fairly lofty goal to achieve, but that's what we're hoping to achieve. And as David, and I don't want to put a tinfoil hat on and go down the rabbit hole here, but you and I are, I think, on the same page. And when it comes to this kind of stuff, we know that the banks leverage their silver dramatically. We know that something in the order of a billion ounces of paper silver trade every day, in that range, give or take. If you call, let's say there's 300 trading days in a year, which is, I think, 320. Multiply that by a billion a day, and then you look at the leverage. Let's make it easy. Call it 300 to 1. So the miners produce 850 million ounces of silver a year. The banks have that leveraged at 300 to 1. So if we take 10 million ounces off the market, that's the equivalent of taking 300 million ounces, if we got the math right here, 300 million ounces off the market, out of the bank's hands. Right?
Well, as you know, I've been pretty vocal through the years that one of my dreams is not only to reinstitute silver in the monetary sphere, which I'm working on in another program, but what you just said, where a mining company can see the vision that First Majestic has had from the start and mint their own. I mean, it's your product and you know what it is. And if it wasn't what you said, there wouldn't be a market for it. Yet there is. In fact, as I stated earlier, and we both know, there's times where these government mints cannot meet demand. And that's only a product because, in all honesty, a kilo of silver is just as much silver as 32.2 silver rounds or silver eagles or silver maples. But regardless of, what the stamp is, the demand is there. In fact, to argue again, the demand is greater than the supply, just on the retail side at times. And then, as you stated earlier, if you look at the total demand, which is industrial, silverware, jewelry, and investment, you are in a deficit situation and have been for some time. So there's a lot there. I think that one of the primary problems, from my perspective, you could certainly have your own, is lack of education. I don't think that there's been enough pain throughout the whole financial system at large where people understand there's several asset classes, but you can break it down into debt instruments, which covers the bond market. There's businesses, which covers the equity market, and there's commodities that rule the roost, because without commodities, nothing happens. If you don't have oil for energy, minerals to build tractors and digging equipment, and could feed your people with the agricultural commodities, you don't have anything. And yet, if you look at a long-term chart of where the commodity cycle is versus, say, the equities or the debt markets, it's pitiful in a way. And we have the flip side of that coin is we've had the benefits of what I would consider too cheap commodity prices. And I'm not advocating for higher food prices. I buy groceries like everyone else. But I think you get the gist of what I'm trying to state. I'll try to be succinct. Stuff we need seems to be low priced, and stuff that's really like a want, like another big screen TV or a fancier car or maybe a bigger house or whatever, that aren't really necessarily needs, have a different pricing mechanism. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, no, I think it's just a complete disconnect. I think that people have taken for granted all the gadgets that we've been buying over the last 50 years, and there was a glut of silver on the surface of the earth because photography and coinage was being eliminated, and those are the largest consumers of silver over the last 100 years, and the 80s, the 60s and 70s come along, and the governments start to sell their silver because they don't need it anymore for coinage, and then photography gets digitized, and that whole market disintegrates. So you had two huge drivers of a major increase in above ground supplies of silver, and we looked at we just thought silver was this cheap metal that was just in abundance that we had never run out of, and it was it's been consumed, it's gone, and people, the market hasn't caught up to that reality. We're seeing institutions starting to get interest in certain things. We saw the lithium phase. We've seen uranium move. We've seen other commodities move as well. But silver just is this lagger that It's just caught in this, as I said earlier, this poor man gold kind of saying that, there is a viewpoint that there is just an abundance of silver out there, and it's not ever an issue. Well, we're going to see that it is an issue, because I could tell you, I'm actively looking for, silver mines around the world, and I know there are few and far between. I could go buy a copper mine or a gold mine, without that much difficulty. But finding a silver mine is near impossible, and the market will catch up to that.
Well, let me add on to that thread. As you know, silver is something I've studied most of my life, and so over the last decade or two, the average grade of silver has gone down, down, and down on aggregate. Yes, I know there's mines that have gotten richer veins here and there, but I mean, on the whole, the grade continues to go down. The price continues to go up because of labor costs and energy costs, jurisdictional issues. Things cost more to feed your mining crew. So there is a disconnect, as you just said, that if you look at the long-term trend, the mining sector has been pretty flat for about the last decade. We've been around the 825 to 850 million ounces. But grade's going down, which means you're moving more dirt at some of your mines than you were, let's say, a decade ago to get out the same quantity of silver. And that trend, as far as I can tell, continues. So I just am matching what you just said. It's like your comments. I'm not, I'm not Keith Neumeyer. I don't run a mining company, but I certainly look at all of them. And that trend is a bit scary if you're sitting there unknowledgeable. In other words, it's critical minerals, what we started this whole show about. That's why it's critical. So many reasons, but that's a reason alone that just it's a depleting supply situation.
Well, David, you're a smart guy. That's an extremely interesting point that you bring up, and it's it doesn't get discussed enough, because that's really the primary driver of costs. Right? If you look back 20 years ago when I first put First Majestic together, for example, we were producing silver at $5 an ounce. Silver was trading at $7-8, at the time. When silver went through $10, we were really having a party. This is great. Now we're making a ton of money. Almost 100% margins, and but our grades were 2 to 3 times what they are today, and that's why the costs are so low. You look at mining company after mining company. I'm not going to name them all. People can go do their own due diligence, but and I watch financial statements of our peer group every quarter. So and it's the same across the board. Costs are elevating, grades are dropping, and production is flat. And it's actually pretty shocking. And there is a perfect storm that's going to occur. What it's going to look like, when it's going to happen, who knows? I don't have a crystal ball, but things will have to change to get the metal out of the ground in a more economic fashion.
Well, we've covered everything I wanted to ask you, Keith. Let me hand it back to you. Is there anything you'd like to say in summary or something we didn't cover?
I think we jumped around a lot. I was happy to, this letter was, we don't exactly know how many people read our letter. We do know it was forwarded by a variety of groups out there. We expect that over 1 million people read the letter. The letter is on our website for people that want to go read it. It's a summary of a larger report. We actually, our team here, led by Jillian, wrote a 20-page document of all the reasons why we think silver should be critical. The letter that was sent to the Canadian government was a summary of that report. That report was also sent to the United States government as well. It's pretty interesting. It's worth reading if there are people that have time to look at it. But we're just going to keep pushing, and I'm a triple-digit silver guy, and I'm going to keep my feet to the fire and to the ground, and keep working to keep educating people on the importance of silver. And I think, David, you and I will win eventually.
Good to hear that, especially coming from you. All right, we're going to go ahead and stop it there. Bruce, if you could take us out.